Okay, go live, okay?
Okay.
Hope I did it right. Okay.
Good afternoon. We're calling the December 16th Honolulu Police Commission meeting to order. It is now 2:01 p.m. In observance of the 16th supplementary proclamation issued by Governor Ige as well as Mayor Kurt Caldwell's emergency orders, and in compliance with social distancing, we are conducting this meeting live via WebEx. And also for those in the room present, we are social distanced and masked whenever not speaking. Thank you everyone for joining us. Attending live in person are Commissioners Okinaga, Chin, Vice Chair Gibson, Commissioner Broderick, Commissioner Perry, and myself. Also present in the room is HPC staff and Dwayne Pang from Corporation Counsel. Joining us on WebEx, I do see Chief Ballard. If you would like to acknowledge who is with you.
Got Deputy Chief McCarthy, Deputy Chief Takasaki Young, and staff. I like that. I'll just say, and HPD staff.
Thank you. And anyone else joining us? I saw some others. If you can note who is attending.
Okay, I thought I was going to get away with just saying staff.
No. Probably
Okay.
not.
We got Lynn Uema, Michelle Yu, Sarah Yoro, and all the assistant chiefs except for Lisa Mann.
Major Trinidad is sitting in for.
Oh, Major Trinidad is sitting in for Lisa Mann.
Great. Thank you very much, Chief. If we can confirm that we have quorum.
Madam Chair, yes, you do have quorum.
Thank you very much, Corporation Counsel. As we go into our live testimony, just a reminder that we accept testimony either written or live via telephone. We ask that all testifiers that would like to testify contact our office 24 hours before the meeting. We had a couple late requests that we are accommodating, so at this time we will be contacting our first testifier, Ms. Suzanne Williams.
Your call has been forwarded to an automated voice messaging system. 808.
Thank you. That is to acknowledge we received the voicemail to Ms. Suzanne Williams, and we will ask her to testify at our next meeting and try to accommodate her then. The second testifier that requests to provide public testimony is Ms. Inocenta Sound Kiku.
Hello.
Hello, may I speak to Ms. Kiku?
Speaking.
Hello, my name is Shannon. I'm calling from the Honolulu Police Commission. You contacted our office to provide public testimony at our meeting today. Is this a good time?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Kiku. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, as a concerned mother and.
Ms. Kiku, can I ask you to speak right into the telephone and as loud as possible, please?
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. As a concerned mother and auntie for many of our young adults, I want to bring my concern to the commission when I hear about stories of what happened to our young adults when they get arrested. One of our boys got arrested. He was already cuffed and put into the police car. And for no reason, the officer came back again and punched him in the face when he's already secure in the vehicle. I'm worried that this kind of action happens to many of our Micronesian young men when they get arrested because they are being singled out for who they are and where they're from. I'm worried that that will continue to happen. There is another nephew of mine walking, minding his own business on the sidewalk, wearing his mask, heading to the clinic when he stopped, took out his phone and called his coordinator to figure out where they're gonna meet. And an officer just harassed him on the side, telling him to get off his phone for no reason. There's no ground for it except that he looked Pacific Islander and he's being singled out for who he is. So I'm worried to continue to see this kind of thing happen to our young men and women, especially because they look different and from a different place. I want to feel secure and safe when I see cops instead of worrying of what they might do with my children or my people. That is my concern that I want to bring to the table. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Ms. Kiku. I'm gonna ask other commissioners if they have any follow-up questions for you. Go ahead,
Yes.
Commissioner Chin has a question.
Sure, it's just a comment. I just want to say, Ms. Kiku, thanks so much for calling in and for allowing us to call you and for bringing this to our attention. We really appreciate you taking the time to do that.
Thank you very much.
And Ms. Kiku, I wanted to inform you that the Honolulu Police Commission has a complaint process which you would be able to exercise, either yourself or your nephews or the persons that you described. And if you need more information, the number you called, I think it was last night, you can call again for further information if that's something you would like to do.
Yes. Thank you very much for taking my call. This is the first time I learned about this, and I will continue to come to the table to share our story.
Thank you, Ms. Kiku. I have one other commissioner who wants to ask you a question, Commissioner Broderick.
Ms. Kiko, I just wanted to follow up on Chair Olivado's comment. I'm not sure that as a commission there's much we can do with what you presented today, but if you were to provide a written complaint with details, then that might work its way up to the commission and give us an opportunity to review it. So I just wanted to make sure that you understood that.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, Ms. Kiku, thank you. If you need to reach us, you know where to contact us. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, we have another public testifier who requested to be contacted by phone. Pilorita Yasam. We'll try her. We tried initially to contact her, but was unsuccessful, so we'll try again. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. That concludes the request for public testimony by telephone. I'd also like to acknowledge written testimony. We received 4 in time for this meeting. The first one is from a Mary Tagalikod. All of you have received her testimony. We do have plans to acknowledge all testimony, whether it's by email or by written postal mail. The first one has information indicating that there was an incident occurring with, I think it was her niece, where the officers responded, and I believe she has some concerns with the officer response. So I think the proper way to respond to Ms. Suzanne W. may be to inform her of our complaint process as well. I don't know if anyone else has any comments with respect to Ms. Tagaliko's concern. The second testimony comes from Kathy Ginoza Arakaki. She identifies herself as a State Farm insurance agent, and she's expressing disappointment about the long wait time for a police report. She expressed that it's been 1 month since her first initial request, and is requesting that there be more quicker response to these requests. She explains that she has a client who has medical insurance matters and needs this police report filed. So that is something we can also ask Chief whether or not that is something she can address later on in our meeting. But given the urgency of her request, also this is one that once we hear what Chief's response may be, we can provide her more information. Anything further on this request?
Would we be able to hear from the chief now, or is it procedurally more appropriate to hear later?
Yeah, I think
More
if we
appropriate
can,
to- sure,
just
okay.
because she can provide more information during her
Okay.
report, if that's okay
Of course.
with everyone else. Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to the third written testifier, Sultan White, expressing some dissatisfaction about an officer's response while at a traffic incident. She expressed that she would like to see more accountability within the department and mentions issues in the audit. She also includes suggestions on dissolving the existing police department and creating a community-based force in its place. Also expresses the need to weed out the bad apples and a whistleblower protection for officers. So if it's okay, what we've been doing is identifying testimony that may be better addressed during our evaluation. And because this one does have direct suggestions that the department may look at, if there's no objection, if we could take this one and include it within our evaluation analysis. Thank you. And then the final testimony is from Mr. O'Day. Let's see. He expressed some concern with respect to the delay, and you're all familiar with Mr. O'Day's request. I think it was 2 meetings ago where he expressed frustration in the response time of HPD providing mugshots. We asked him what his intent was in using the mugshots, and I believe he expressed that he uses it for his HBD or Honolulu Crime News site. So he also expressed that he's frustrated. It's apparent that he's frustrated. We did respond to him acknowledging that HPD has responded to him, although has not been in his favor. They have not denied his request, but has indicated that their resources are limited and therefore they would need more time to provide those requested documents. This is one that we would also acknowledge. I think we've become, it's been our practice to now acknowledge all communication to ensure that those reaching out to us know that we're reading the content and, actually wanting to do something about them. So thank you, all testifiers. And if you're watching, if you have any follow-up questions for us, please provide it to the commission directly. Moving on the agenda is Chief of Police report. Hi, Chief.
Oh, I forgot I had to hit mute. Wow, good afternoon. I guess we have a couple of videos to show. One on the post and one on, was that the Thanksgiving? Yeah. So if we can show those.
Thank you, Chief.
They're being queued up now. Can they see that?
How is someone living on the street going to be able to safely social distance, safely stay at home? Because you cannot stay at home if there's nowhere for you to go. This is the post-growth program, which is the provisional outdoor screening and triage. Basically, what we have here is an area for our homeless population to safely practice social distancing.
So post first started in April. April when the pandemic just started to hit Hawaii. Program was created as an extension of our HONU program. Our HONU program stands for Homeless Outreach and Navigation for the Unsheltered. So POST essentially continues the mission of HONU in a pandemic setting. HONU was our innovative navigation center, which was 24 hours for police officers to defer people to social services in lieu of enforcement. Also to offer people a place to go with transport 24 hours a day and not have any reason where at the point in time where someone wanted help, they couldn't receive help.
Okay, I'm gonna cry. I think I want people to understand that the police department really created a place where we could collaborate. You know, the whole community could come together and we could actually do our part together.
POST acts as the catch-all. So POST is like HONU, where think of it as a train station. Any reason that someone can't be grasped at the moment, POST can fill. So let's say there's an outreach mission happening in the evening and there's no intake hours at say an IHS or one of those other facilities. They can temporarily come to POST, and then in the morning time, navigation specialists will get that person's spot at the appropriate shelter. That's how it differs. We don't close. We don't have intake lack of capacity or set intake hours. We're there to stabilize people and then move them on to our partners, the brick and mortar shelters and providers.
You know, I am truly grateful, you know, for the fact that, you know, HPD stepped up in the way that they did and that they really invited, you know, the rest of the community service providers to be a part. When I think about it, you know, this POST program was key, you know, to really, I think, providing safety and providing services, both, you know, to the people that we're serving, but to the community.
Thank you. Is there one more video or is that it, Chief?
One more.
Okay.
One more.
Sorry, no volume on our side.
A feast
Okay,
donated
hold
by
on.
the
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's
Oh,
good.
sorry, it was my fault. I muted the button. Can you hear now?
Yes, thank you.
today we're doing something special for our participants, just because in the situation they're in right now in their lives, we're all pretty much all they have. So we wanna bring them together and make them feel like, you know, they're part of a family during the holiday season. We have a feast donated by the regular officers out here. They put in money. They purchased some catering goods. We had a lot of officers donate prizes like gift cards, food, little coolers and stuff like that. And a lot of officers are donating time too. They really didn't want to be recognized. A lot of them just gave me donations under the table. But they're honestly giving the most selfless act possible. They see the potential in these guys. They want them to thrive. They want them to have success. And they're giving back to the community that quite a few of them came out of.
I want to give a good shout out to all staff and HPD for providing this for us. At first, I didn't care too much about police officers back on the streets because that's what they're a lot. But get to know them, all officers over there, they're pretty cool. They're good people.
The first two safety precautions, we wanted to make sure of social distancing and mask precautions. So we did everything we could, and I think it'll be great to have them enjoy for a little bit and then go back to their sites. But it doesn't mean we can't celebrate, you know. We want to make them feel celebrated too. Well, we have turkey, we have stuffing, we have mashed potatoes, balsamic, and then we have juice and water for them.
And thought about that. We'll try putting something to it, like maybe potato macaroni salad.
It's gonna be a feast. I called in a favor for my brother. My brother Solomon Spencer. He's leading in his band Lily Coy. Him and our church family friend is out here to just donate their time, and they want to give back to the community also. So they're willing, and we're thankful for it.
Staff and HPD, they make it good at home.
They're very thankful to have a safe place to lay their head, because it's hard in the street. It's hard being subject to, crimes against them. It's hard being enforced upon. So they're very thankful for this program that we're running.
So as you see, a lot of effort is put into helping out our homeless population, doing what we can. And I know there's been some criticism saying that too much money is being spent, and that money could have been used to build that temporary housing or whatever. But our program is not just about housing. Our program is also about wraparound services. It's about getting them the help that they need. It's about having them being able to bring their pets with them, getting veterinarian care, making sure that they've got what they need to transition into the next phase of their life. So it's not just about supplying a house. It's about supplying support and services to these unfortunate individuals who are having issues. So we just wanted to highlight some of the things that our folks are doing out there. I think people forget, all the work that we're putting into this, and even to the fact where, the homeless population, the ones that we service and help through Post and before HONU, really does appreciate it. And I tell you a quick story. I was walking back from the city council meeting this morning, and one homeless guy saw us walking by, and he stopped and told us thank you for all that we do, and he says, don't worry, I'm gonna put on my mask because I know I'm supposed to have it on. So we try and do what we can, and I think it is appreciated even by those who are trying to help. So I just wanted to point out and give kudos to our folks who are working with the Post program. And then
Could I comment? Sorry, before you move on. I think what I found disappointing about that recent story that you mentioned was the fact that they failed to recognize that HPD was stepping up in the height of the pandemic when IHS had an outbreak, and they were no longer able to accept people just on a whim because there was no quarantine facilities that could accommodate those that may not have been within the IHS community already. And also the early release program, because I recall quite vividly concerns about the early release program and the fact that some of the houseless advocates were saying that they're showing up, at these houseless camps that we're all familiar with, right, in all the parks. But post transition from HONU allowed space for those houseless individuals to come to and be able to, have somewhere to rest their head. And I don't want to criticize them calling out the department for spending those monies, but to kind of pivot and say that this money could have gone to housing, yeah, definitely. But there's so much other things that are, impacting the ability of the availability of temporary housing. That it just was. I didn't think it was a fair report. So I appreciate you raising it today.
Yeah, and along with that, the fact that they were saying that we're only half full. The whole reason that we have Post is it's expandable and it's contractible. So yes, we have areas to house up to however many the homeless population, but we contract down to whatever it is that we need. So to say that we're only using half of what we had, that's not the information we gave them. But they took that information and they made it sound the way that they made it sound, and it's just so frustrating because they just are really not doing a fair and balanced reporting anymore. It seems like everything is just an opinion piece and sensationalism.
Commissioner Okinaga?
Chief, I think one thing that I remember hearing, and I just don't remember the numbers, but the success rate of Honu, I don't know if there's metrics on posts, but in terms of once you get people into that environment and then access to resources, that then they become, you have a much higher success rate in terms of housing them, at least temporarily. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Yes, even with Post, we do, I want to say we've helped close to like 400.
Over 700.
How many?
Over 700.
Over 700 people from Post. So as far as, how many people, the success rate, I don't know, but I mean, and we talk to the officers and they get frustrated too because, they have a hard time getting these people to get resources. And so if there's no place to bring them, after they ask for the 100th time, and this person said, yeah, I want help, the fact that they've got some place to take them, because if you don't take them right away, then you're going to lose that opportunity to perhaps get them into the services they need. And I think people forget that, and it's not all about just building a house and then putting them in some house and saying, hey, we solved the problem. It's not, because unless you address those underlying issues, which is mental illness and or substance abuse, then you can give them all the houses in the world and it's not going to be successful. You have to treat those underlying conditions, and that is what we are trying to address in a very small part with Post. I mean, this needs to be more of a community-wide, island-wide issue as far as getting these folks help that they need, whether they want it or not. And I'll get off my soapbox now.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions on that issue?
Okay, we also will be having some EM promotions, our command staff, starting January 24th. So the folks who were promoted to captain was William Beckley, Herbert Soria, Elgin Arquero, Paul Okamoto, and Manny Hernandez. Those who were promoted to majors are Gail Beckley, Eric Yoshimori, Mark Criccio, Sonny Santos, and David Chang. And then also too, we have been working, our MED has been working with the city and state for the vaccination plans. HPD is looking at the vaccination for their personnel somewhere between December 22nd and December 30th. I guess there's going to eventually be online registration, but we're waiting for the state to take care of that. And that's all I have.
Any questions for Chief? Chief, regarding the promotions, is there something you can send us in writing just so we kind of know who the individuals are? Or is there a memo?
It'll come out in the personnel notice, and you'll be sent that when it gets published.
Okay. Thank you. Question?
Yeah, Chief, I was just wondering if you could explain what the vaccine program is going to be for the department and for the officers on the front line.
They'll sign up online, they'll go to a specified location, and then they'll get their first shot. And then 30 days to 6 months after that, I guess it depends upon whenever the second dose comes in, then it'll be the same thing. Online registration, they'll go to a specified location to receive their vaccination.
Is it voluntary, or do they have to do it?
No, it's voluntary. It's not mandatory. It's all voluntary.
Do you have a sense of whether people will be doing it?
Yeah, I think we've had about 1,200, a little over 1,200 people that said yes. We had, was it 500?
580.
580 who said no, and then we had
About 100.
yeah, about 100 people who looked at it and didn't respond, and that was me. I was one of those, because I was like, okay, well, do I need to use the vaccine for to travel? If that's the case, I'll take it, But so yeah, I'm one of those that are still on the fence. I don't even get flu shots, so yeah, I'm worried about upsetting the balance of the body.
Commissioner Broderick has a question.
Chief, on those 580 that said no, were they just asked to say yes or no, or were they asked to explain why they said no?
No, they just yes or no, yes, no, and maybe. I think there was a, no, there was no maybe. It was just yes or no. You didn't have a choice.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, and their family members would not be eligible, right, for those?
Correct. It's just the first line, first responder. So it'll be police, fire, and EMS vote.
Okay, no further questions. No further questions, Chief, but if you could touch upon the clearance rate data. I think the question was surrounding the data you provided us with respect to internal NIBRS numbers and the comparison to what Civil B reported. I think there may be some follow-up questions, or if you could somewhat explain to us how that compares.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Vanek.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, in recognition of Assistant Chief Vanek's presentation sometime in February, we just wanted to have some time to ask some questions about this data as well, but we look forward to the February presentation.
Okay. Okay, Roddy.
Hello, everyone. Can you folks hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I think it would be helpful just to provide a little bit of background so you can put the numbers into context. So in 2016, November of 2016, we changed from our old records management system, RMS, to our new and current RMS. At that point, we also started collecting NIBRS data in the with the knowledge that come 2021 next year, it would be mandatory. So we wanted to get ahead of the game and make sure that when that deadline came around, we were ready. So the first full year of data that we collected was 2017, which in 2018 we reported. And then again in 2019, we were able to report NIBRS data, and at that point we became certified. The FBI has a very strict guideline which requires agencies that report to meet a certain percentage error, under a certain percentage error rate, and we were able to achieve that and become certified. So prior to switching over to the NIBRS reporting, we were working directly with the AG's office and their data gathering personnel over there. And I'm sure Commissioner Chin can attest to this, but they're a great group of people. You know, when we report our data, there's a lot of back and forth. They look at our data, there's a lot of conversation. And you know what, this doesn't kind of match what you guys reported last year. Are you sure that these numbers are correct? So we had that relationship with the AG's office prior to moving to our new RMS. Once we became certified in 2018 and we started reporting directly to the FBI, there was none of that back and forth. As Chief McCarthy mentioned during his presentation at the last meeting, once the FBI has your data, that's it. It's a snapshot, a point in time, and whatever your data is, there is no discussion. That's what they publish. So when they published it, when we reported it earlier this year in 2020, and it had not gone through the Attorney General's office. This was the first time that we had a chance to look at the data and we're like, hey, you know what, this doesn't look right. So what we did internally was we took a look and we started with the murder numbers, just because the numbers were relatively small compared to all of the other types of crimes. So, and we keep very good records of our different offenses. So when we looked at it, we saw, hey, you know what, these numbers are not correct regarding the offenses. Based on the definitions for NIBRS, there were some incidents that were being counted that shouldn't have been. And if you look at the definition based on what the FBI says and what NIBRS says is murders, the classification of murder is the willful, it's actually called murder and non-negligent manslaughter. It's the willful, non-negligent killing of one human being by another. But what we noticed is on that list, there were actually some that were being counted which wouldn't fall into that category, and that would be either negligent manslaughter or justifiable homicides. So when we did an audit of the information that was being reported to and by the FBI, we realized for offenses, those were incorrect. In regards to clearances, what we saw when we did an audit on that regards was we looked at, well, what is the definition of what the FBI considers a clearance? And what the FBI basically considers a clearance is you have to have an arrest for an offense, or it has to be cleared by an exceptional mean. Also, again, what Chief McCarthy had reported. And when we took a look at that, we saw that what the detectives were doing was they were confusing what NIBR's clearances were versus what internal case management was. So in other words, what I mean was we keep track of how what happens to certain cases. So in other words, if a person is arrested, it's conferred with the prosecutor's office, and for whatever reason, the prosecutor, for other than not having probable cause, declines the case, we keep track of that internally. So what the detectives were doing was they were changing the disposition of the case from arrested, which would have counted as a clearance, to conferred with prosecutors and not accepted. What they were doing unknowingly was they were taking something that we should have been getting credit for, and they were removing that credit basically so that we could account for it better internally. But that actually messed us up on the NIBR's reporting part, and we weren't aware that this was happening. I mean, they weren't doing it maliciously. They didn't realize that by doing that, that affected our NIBR's reporting. So when we discovered that and we went through all of the cases, we were able to discover there were a bunch that had been changed. So we changed them back because that would have been the proper way to have reported it. Then we realized, well, if they're doing that for murders, we should take a look at all of the different part one offenses. So forcible rape, robbery, aggravated assault. So those are the violent crimes, and also the property crimes, burglary, larceny, theft, motor vehicle theft. And when we did that, we saw the same trend. So because of that whole reporting directly to the FBI, not having that back and forth, which we have and a great relationship with the Attorney General's office, we didn't have that chance to pre-audit, I guess, our numbers before they were reported. Moving forward, now that we have a system in place, we know the differences of what affects the numbers, what affects the clearances. We've actually even provided training to our detectives, and they've implemented it into their new detective training awareness program so that when new detectives come through, they'll also be aware of all of these different things that affect NIBR's clearances. So moving forward, we should be okay. Additionally, we started reporting to the FBI because at the time, the Attorney General's was in the process of creating a repository where the data could be reported to, but that too, the FBI has very specific and very stringent guidelines. And until I believe it's recently, they did become certified. So now, instead of reporting directly to the FBI, moving forward, we will go back to reporting directly to the AG's office. Now we'll have also that back and forth. So moving forward, hopefully our numbers are much more accurate. We'll be able to, like I said, audit the numbers. And then once we come to, we're comfortable, then the AG's office will then report that data to the FBI, and then hopefully we're okay. So that's kind of, I know it's very detailed, but I just wanted to provide you folks with as much information as possible, just to take you through what happened and what we did about it, and moving forward, make sure that the numbers are as accurate as possible.
Thank you very much. Do we have any follow-up questions from commissioners regarding that information?
Okay.
Commissioner Chin?
I know, sorry, NIBR's is super complicated, and it's hard to just kind of give you just a, very brief, I want to make it as simple as possible, but without really giving you an explanation, just saying, oh, the numbers were wrong and we looked at it and now they're better. I mean, yeah, I want to make sure you folks understand that, we understand the numbers are super important. They go to government officials. People make decisions on where they're going to live. Businesses, use those numbers where we're going to open shop. So we as a department, we got to make sure that the numbers that we provide are not just numbers, they gotta be accurate. And we want to make sure moving forward that we're as accurate as possible so people can use that information to make very important decisions. So.
Hey, Chief Attic and everyone, thank you very much for today's presentation. First of all, I said this last week, but maybe I didn't underscore this enough, but I definitely congratulate the department on making the transition to NIBRS. I know that logistically, and just in terms of everything that needed to be done in the records division to be able to make that change happen, that was a very, very big deal and something that the department had worked on for many, many years. And so the fact that you were able to reach it, even in advance of when it was required, is really excellent. And it's even good that it happened in Honolulu County, where the department is so much bigger than some of the other counties where they could very quickly be able to make that transition. So that's fantastic. We ended up getting a handout that kind of compared on the top part. It kind of shows the difference between what was reported on the FBI website versus the bottom half of the handout that we received, which shows what the NIBRS data actually is. So I'm taking this handout to mean that that the bottom half is a more accurate reflection of what the numbers ought to be. And that's helpful. It's great to be able to see that. I guess what really does jump out is the fact that in the murder category, then there's a big jump in terms of clearance rate in 2018 and 2019, and in particular, murder goes from 63% to 88%. So that's a big jump. I would say that overall, it looks like in 2019 that the total index crimes goes from what was reported on the FBI website of 7.1% to 7.8%, which really, that doesn't seem like a whole lot. So I'm actually not ready to judge that or decide whether that's good or bad. I wanted to ask you or the chief, just like how should the public, like in other words, we're getting a more accurate record. It's moved up from 7.1 to 7.8%. Is that okay? Is that not okay? Is there room for improvement? I think now that we have this data, I think what the public is going to want to know and what we're going to want to know is how should we feel about that? Is that where does that put us in terms of what the department could be is doing, or what could it be doing better? I'm not quite sure how to react to that.
Sure, Commissioner, that's a very very good and very fair question. So one thing I'd like to point out is that under this uniform crime reporting system developed by the FBI, which was actually developed back in the 1930s, it was revamped in the 1960s, and then right around the 1980s, they realized, and you know what, this is a very antiquated way of counting numbers. What the FBI realized is that it's not a really good indication of the true nature of either the types of crimes or what departments and agencies are doing in the community. And what I mean is that if you have a very low, let's say, violent crime rate or murder rate, but that's countermanded or counteracted by maybe a lot higher property crime rate, it's not going to have a very big impact, especially if you're clearing, let's say, 80, 90% of your violent crimes. But for crimes like, let's say, petty theft, or where they're petty misdemeanors or not felonious at all, and you have maybe a little higher or a lower clearance rate, that'll offset all the good stuff that you're doing basically on the violent crime. And the FBI realized that. And that's why they moved away. They don't even call it index crimes anymore, because they said if before maybe you could take these crimes and you could say this is a pretty good representation of all of the other crimes that occur. But over the years, even the FBI realized crimes and the way people commit crimes and the way we look at crime has become much more complicated, which is why they created NIBRS. So the summary reporting system, which I believe is the handout that you got really only looks at a very small segment of types of crimes. As Chief McCarthy mentioned, this new NIBRS, what it does is instead of looking at just these small numbers of crimes, it's taking the crimes, it's expanding them, and you're getting much more detailed. So if you do see like an increase in this area or a decrease in that area, it's much, much more easy to identify, not only for the public, but even for agencies, and they can address it a lot easier. So to answer your question, what I would say to the public is, yes, there's a 7.1 to 7 point, less than a 1% increase in clearance. But keep in mind that the way the numbers are counting, if you look at, like you said, just the murder numbers, we went from 63, which was before, to 88. That is a much more accurate representation of basically how safe Honolulu is. We are, I believe, among the large cities in the nation, the safest city when it comes to violent crimes. And those are substantiated by our clearance rates for our violent crimes. So I would say look forward when the NIBRS numbers come out to see all of these different crimes broken up into all of these 24, not just 8 different categories and 52 different offenses. And that'll hopefully give a much better and paint a much better picture of what's happening as far as crime-wise and how the police is reacting to it in the city of Honolulu.
Just kind of a bolt-on to Commissioner Chin's question. Is there a standard set of goalposts for the clearance rates on the 8 that we even have at this point? Is there a national standard for murder? We're at 88.2%. That sounds pretty good to me. But then when you go to robbery at 19, is that good? Is that standard? Is there anything that is already set up that we can compare ourselves against?
So one thing, sorry, Commissioner, one thing I'd like to make a note of is when you go to the FBI's page, they make a very distinct, they really warn against, and I know you're asking what is the kind of the rate, but they warn against comparing agencies against each other based on the numbers, either occurrences and or clearance rates, because it's not a true and accurate representation of the things that are going on within the agency or within the municipality. And as an example, some of the things that they warn against is, well, are you looking at a place that's very rural or a place that's very urbanized? What is the what is the social economic status of these places? So to answer your question, I really don't know what I guess the ballpark number is across the board for the nation, but I can tell you in cities our size, an 88% percentage clearance rate is very high.
Thank you.
Commissioner Broderick?
Yeah, I guess these questions are all very much related. Commissioner Chin and Commissioner Gibson, thanks so much because it helps clarify things for me. I guess I want to come back to Commissioner Chin's question, and I really am curious, as the department looks at the total index crimes of 7.8%, are you pleased? Are you satisfied? Are you concerned? What is your feeling right now about that number that you've told us today is accurate?
So, as a department, it's our goal. Our number one goal is to make sure that we're keeping Honolulu safe. That should actually be the goal of any police department, to tell you the truth. So are we satisfied with 7.8? Quite frankly, no. We always want to do better. I know that the department is taking some steps, and maybe if Chief wants to talk about it, I know we're looking at acquiring positions like an analyst to take a look at these numbers to see what we can do. We're working on stuff like a real-time crime center where we can see these things happening and help our officers, give them information so that we can bring the number of crimes down and be able to clear more crimes. But no, quite frankly, we're always looking to do better. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Commissioner.
It does, thank you.
Any further questions for Chief Vanek? Thank you very much, Chief Vanek. We look forward to your further presentation in February.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Chief Ballard, moving on to the status update of overtime investigations. But before you provide your report, I just wanted to bring everybody just a recap because a lot has been going on with respect to this overtime investigation. So just a quick recap of things that are before us and things that the commission as a body needs to address. So November 20th is when HPD's internal audit found that officers may have violated internal overtime for COVID enforcement. On that same date, Chief Ballard, you suspended the CET enforcement. On November 30th, you provided a statement to the officers and also to the media with respect to recognizing that there were overtime violations and taking responsibility for them. On December 2nd, at our last HPC meeting, you shared that the investigation was ongoing with respect to OT violations. Commission asked why it would take several months as you expressed, but you indicated it was because of due process guidelines and also with respect to the allegations against officers. On December 3rd, a newspaper report said that Mayor Kirk Caldwell said no federal funds would be used for COVID enforcement and instead city will pay for the inappropriate OT. That's something that is top of mind, I think, for most taxpayers and definitely the commission. December 7th, HPC receives an anonymous letter indicating serious allegations against Chief's office, including but not limited to mismanagement of federal funds, fear of retaliation, unwillingness to listen to command staff, and suggestions on COVID-19 operational plan, and claims that anyone who speaks out would face the wrath. And the letter actually requests the commission to do a formal investigation. On December 8th, you acknowledged the anonymous letter through a blog, which disputed the allegations in the anonymous letter and shared that the investigation is ongoing. On December 9th, the commission received another letter from a retired officer, Lieutenant Alexander Garcia, explaining the process for HPD 66, a form which officers complete with respect to any overtime. So just wanting to bring those facts and just a recollection of these, and if I'm in error of any of those facts, please let me know, but just wanting to bring that to everyone's attention. Before, if you have any comments with respect to either the anonymous letter as a follow-up to your blog or anything to update us on, Chief.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Alvarado. This is Deputy Takasaki. So just to let you know, like Chief Ballard mentioned in the last commission hearing regarding our audit or inquiry investigation into the CET, what we call overtime, it will still take a couple of months just because of the sheer amount of records that we have to double check and review in terms of the accuracy regarding the information. Just to give you a quick update regarding the officers, regarding the criminal cases, that is still currently ongoing, and I believe at this time it has been forwarded to the AG's office because of a conflict with the DPA's office regarding the prosecution or acceptance of the investigation by them.
Anyone have any questions?
Also too, as far as the retired officer's letter, he never attended any command meeting, and that form is just an overtime card that's submitted to the sergeant or the command for them to sign and go straight to their district PTNA. So it's not anything that the fourth floor sees or is aware of. That would all still come under the purview of the commander of that district, or the fact they're leaning on the fact that the PTNA clerk would look at it, but unless she or he's got audit experience, then nothing would come out. So it was unfortunate that he, decided to write and did not have the experience or even the knowledge of, how the PTNA system works.
Any further questions or comments? I think, just to let you know, Chief, with respect to the anonymous letter, that is something I believe the commission will be discussing as to how to respond. We have been making it a practice to respond to all letters, even though it's anonymous. The question is, do we ignore it? And I don't think we necessarily ignore it because it is presenting some facts that may need, further investigation. And that's just off the top of my head, and nothing the commission has discussed as a whole. So just throwing it out there. Commissioner Parry.
Yeah, Chief, one of the implications in or perhaps it's more than an implication, but one of the things that came out of that anonymous letter was the suggestion that there was other ideas put forward that weren't considered and certainly weren't acted upon. And I guess I'd like to know whether or not if somebody has a perspective on how to put in place a system or put in place a practice, whether or not that does get discussed and considered, and obviously ultimately you make the decision. And so I'm not suggesting for a moment you have to agree with everything that people put forward. But is there an opportunity to for people to put forward ideas and for those to be considered with an open mind?
There is, and those suggestions that were put forth in that letter, we were already doing them. So to say that we weren't doing them, as I said to the council today when we were talking about the city audit, we do have computer programs that for our special duty as well as for our traffic. So after you hit a certain number of hours, you're not allowed to register for any more after that. And as I told them, it was my fault because I just assumed that when I sent out a memo or a guideline saying that this is what you're supposed to write, because it was a very short period of time for this overtime, that I would just assume that the commanders as well as the supervisors, sergeants, lieutenants, as well as the officer would follow those guidelines. But as I told the city council, that's my fault for assuming that they would follow the rules, that I should have, just waited another 2 months, held up the overtime for a couple more months and got a similar computer program in place. So I know now in the future that, we're not going to try and rush anything, even if we're getting pressured by any other organization for enforcement or anything else, that we're going to take our time and make sure we do it right. And so I like I said, I accept responsibility for that, for assuming that people were going to follow the rules.
Chief, just a question about, given the ongoing investigation, what would you say the climate is like within the officer ranks as to some of the responses you may be hearing or not? I think it's just interesting that we're receiving these letters, and I think as a commission we want to encourage folks to communicate with us. It would really help if they would identify themselves, but we can't force anyone to come forward. We still encourage communication though, whether it's anonymous or identified, but just wanting to hear if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, it's unfortunate in this climate, it's all about the money. And, when you stop, and especially now even more so that, with the budget constrictions coming up, everything, there's not going to be overtime. We're going to be restricting the amount of overtime that they can work. We've already restricted the amount of special duty that they can work. So all of a sudden, when you had all this, the overtime that they had for the COVID enforcement, and then it stopped, it upset a lot of people because they no longer had all that extra money. And I guess it's just going to have to go back that people need to learn to live within their means. And anytime when it comes to money, things turn nasty. As we all know, money is the root of all evil. So that's basically what it comes down to, is it's all about the money.
Okay, so I guess the follow-up question to that is, your blog indicated that federal funds will be used for the COVID enforcement. Is that correct? And was the other article in error? I think
we're not using any of the only funds that we're using, COVID funds we're using, is to continue to staff post through the end of the year, and also to use for our enforcement, the COVID enforcement hotline. Those are the only two uses. There is no enforcement, COVID enforcement team for the citations, warnings, or arrests. That's all being done by on-duty officers, not on overtime, not city overtime, not anything. It's on-duty officers as part of their regular jobs or what they're expected to do.
Okay, thank you. Anything further?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm a little bit confused. I think this is a letter from you. Maybe, is this what you issued to the media you sent to us? Okay. You indicate in there that our intent is to discuss the content of the letter in full at our next meeting and request action steps from the chief and the department to get complete transparency as to the issues. Did you have anything in particular in mind when you wrote request action steps?
Nothing in particular right now. I thought maybe we would discuss it as a body if anyone has suggestions. But one idea, Chief, and you know, as we get into your evaluation, I think all of these things may come up. So it is one way of looking at the bigger picture and how we look at this further. But really kind of looking to the commission as a whole on any steps that we want to take to address the overtime allegations. Because I think the concern is, the question is, do we wait till the department's investigation is complete and then thereafter see what the results are and then take actions that way? And I think, you know, because we don't have the resources to do the investigation, that would probably be the best. So I don't know, any feedback on that, Chief? Because we're awaiting your complete investigation to be shared with us, because that's the only way we would have information on it.
Well, I'm confused. I mean, actions, I mean, as far as me misusing or mismanaging the funds, the investigation is for the officers and the supervisors for not following the guidelines. So I don't know, I'm a bit confused as to what we're talking about here.
I think it's more about finding out what the investigation reveals and whether it's the steps that were not followed internally and what the department may be doing to correct those, the use or the exercise of that overtime, and seeing how the department has corrected some of that, which you already told us about.
Yeah, I think there's two issues really. One is the overtime seeming abuse by some of the officers, investigating that. But then the second is, why did that happen, and what lessons can we learn, what actions will we take in future to prevent that sort of thing happening again?
Okay, first off, and not to be disrespectful, but I respectfully disagree with calling it overtime abuse. The overtime has been worked. The problem is they didn't follow internal guidelines. So there was no abuse of any overtime per se. I guess more clearly,
there was an abuse of your policies and
right, correct.
the parameters which they were given.
Yeah, and then the second thing is that as I think I already mentioned earlier, is that I accept responsibility because I assume we have programs in place. We have computer programs in place that we're using for traffic and also special duty that they would have had to have signed up for. And then once they reach a certain number of hours, they're kicked out of the system. They're no longer allowed to sign up. But as I said, I just assumed by putting out those guidelines for that very short period of time that these officers were going to work, that my guidelines and procedures would have been followed by my commanders, from my assistant chiefs all the way down. And obviously that did not happen. And so I know that in the future, any overtime that we have outside of, our regular staff shortages or court overtime or that type of things, which is already being put into the PTNA and tracked by our finance division, is that I will need to make sure that we use those computer programs, even if it means not starting a program as quickly as possible that we will take our time and make sure that we do it appropriately, because I accept responsibility that I should not have assumed that people were going to do what we told them to do without having very, very specific safeguards in place. Like I said, I'm very disappointed in what happened, because I expected a whole lot more of my command staff and my sergeants, my officers, and my lieutenants as well. So I think, you know, we know which direction to go in the future. And unfortunately, we were just I was trying to move too fast to get things done to try and address this COVID issue.
Thank you. Commissioner Okinaga has a question.
Not so much a question, more an analysis. Chief, I just want to echo your statements about coverage of this issue, because it's been very confusing from the public's perspective of the different relays of the facts, quote unquote facts, depending on which newspaper you're reading at the time. And I would echo your request to the media to cover the facts the way the chair has laid out in terms of the events, the processes that were followed, and your statements just given now, which was very honest and heartfelt. I guess the other comment is, it's just a shame that a few people, to your point in your audit response, have such a disproportionate impact on the the remainder of the force in terms of opportunities for overtime, especially like you said, during this time of budget cutbacks and, you know, furloughs and like. So it's more a comment than anything else. I will say to my fellow commissioners that I took a look at the guidelines for personnel matters involving the chief, because we had adopted these to try to set forth those kind of parameters when we would start investigating or looking into things. The charter sets forth 4 events or allegations that would warrant suspension or termination or some kind of removal of the chief of police. And I took a look at those 4 as compared to this anonymous letter. As Chief, I think, stated earlier, it is more about mismanagement of the issue as opposed to the types of things that are set forth in the charter. So the very first charter provision talks about commission of any act while engaged in the performance of his or her duties that constitute a reckless disregard for the safety of the public or another law enforcement officer. Second one is causing a material fact to be misrepresented for any improper or unlawful purpose. Third is being unable to perform his or her duties with reasonable competence or reasonable safety because of a mental condition, including alcohol or substance abuse, or acting in a manner or furthering his or her self-interest in a manner inconsistent with the interests of the public or the chief's governing body. So these are not exhaustive. We can, you know, decide differently. I just thought, I personally wanted to go back and look at our own guidelines as to what we thought was worthy of an investigation versus something that, as Chair has already identified, handled through the evaluation. And for the public, I just want to, at least me personally, the way I feel about why we talk about it in the context of the chief's evaluation is because under the charter, the commission has very few elucidated duties, and one of them is performance of evaluation for the chief. So we always put it in that bucket. We're not necessarily saying that it's an automatic, you know, negative on the chief's evaluation or a positive. We just the commission buckets it in that bucket because that's one of our charter duties. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief, just an observation. You have a very good program with special duty, like you kind of alluded to a bit ago with, you know, traffic and watching construction, that kind of thing. Could COVID, special emergencies, this type of thing, be able to go into that type of bucket and they could enforce it or work through that? Is that something that makes any sense, or does it have to be treated differently and specially?
Well, I mean, that's what I was talking about, that we could have used a similar program, but it would have been, it has to have been specifically for the CIT, because we don't want to start mixing monies, you know, federal money, state money, city monies. So that's why it would have to be a distinct program. I mean, it was just, I mean, we already have something similar developed. It would not be that difficult to do it, you know, for in this incident for the COVID money, but obviously that train has left the station because we're not doing that. And I don't expect that even if we get any stimulus money in the future, that the police department is going to be taking any of that money unless it's for any PPEs or to restock like our Clorox 360 sprayers or something like that. So in the near or far future, I don't see this type of thing happening again. But if it does, like I said, we'll be ready, and I won't take just assume that people are going to follow our direction, especially when it comes to money. Unfortunately, money turns people into a three-headed beast. So I need to keep that under consideration.
Thank you.
Commissioner Broderick has a question, Chief.
Chief, I know it's always hard to get anonymous letters. I've received them over the years myself. I'm assuming that your position is that it's not true, that if he had identified himself, it would result in immediate banishment to a most undesirable assignment. I wanted to give you an opportunity just to respond to that.
There are no undesirable positions in the police department. If we have an undesirable position, then we should not even have that position. Every command, every position that we have here in the department, there is a reason for it, and it's all these different positions working together. They may perceive it as an undesirable position, but believe me, I've been there, done that, and I thought CRD was an undesirable position. But let me tell you, it was probably one of the best positions that I was in, and was able to make a lot of changes there, and also, be able to contribute a lot within the police department. So, I really take offense when people say that they're being banished to undesirable positions. That may be their opinion, but there are no undesirable positions in this department.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, and Chief, I was watching part of EMLA today, and I think that was one of the questions from one of the council members about retaliation and any complaints that come with respect to claims of retaliation. And I appreciated that you indicated that PSO would be able to investigate that. I guess some of the concern from officers is that PSO is part of the chief's office, so in submitting, a complaint, that it would be revealed to you. But could you just touch on that a little bit about how the PSO investigation is independent and would not infringe on their anonymity or investigation or complaint?
So Commissioner Alvarado, Deputy Chief Takasaki, so for your question, I believe what you're trying to ask for is if people would feel that complaints are submitted to the PSO, which is under the direction of the chief, they feel that it wouldn't be properly, I guess, looked into. Is that your question?
Yes. Yes.
So just to let you know, the Professional Standards Office detectives are hand selected, yeah, unlike other divisions where people can go there pretty much by seniority. So it's not selected by the chief, yeah. We have a staff comprised of a major and lieutenant, and it's under my direction. So I was formerly acting commander there as well as the lieutenant, and I hold every complaint, whether it comes in as anonymous or with somebody's name attached to it, that we have to look into it fairly. And as you understand, the Professional Standards Office is a element within the division that investigates its own personnel. However, the investigation is done on a fairly neutral and separate entity on its own, where they do an investigation, and like I said, the investigation is done, it shouldn't be done for the department and neither for the employee. They gather the facts, they look into it, and they present the facts of the investigation to the decision-making board, which is the Administrative Review Board. So I like to view the Professional Standards Office as an element with a very selective bunch of officers who have integrity and values aligning with the department to ensure that policies and procedures and misconduct are investigated thoroughly.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Any other questions for Chief with respect to this topic? Sorry, Chief, just following up on the testifier's comment with respect to the 1 month wait time for an appointment to pick up police report. Is that something you can comment on? I know resources are very, very short, so we understand, but anything we can provide this constituent with respect to her question?
Janet, can you take that, please?
Hello, everyone again. So one of the divisions that fall under my purview is the Records Division, and Records Division is responsible for providing reports or HPD records requests. Currently, because of COVID and social distancing, we do require when people need to pick up a report that they make an appointment online. I don't know at the time what the wait was, but there is a wait. It isn't something that someone can just come down and stand in line. I'm not sure exactly, was it that she just had to wait a long time? Was that what the complaint was, or?
Yeah, 1 month, and I can forward you her communication so you have all the information, Chief. But it indicates one month wait time for an appointment.
I just want to make sure that I'm pretty sure I'm aware of this, but where was the location that she said the report was initiated? Could you elaborate?
It does not specify, she doesn't, she doesn't specify, but her.
Okay, if this is the one that I'm thinking of, we're actually already aware of it. And I guess what she didn't know was that she had to make an appointment online to get the report. As far as the wait time, I mean, until this COVID thing goes away, I mean, one of our primary concerns, obviously, we want to make sure that we're transparent and then we provide people with the resources and the services that we're supposed to provide. But at the same time, I want to make sure, and I think the department and the chief would agree, is that we're not willing to do that at the risk of putting people in harm's way. I mean, so far, this program that I'm aware of, making the appointments, I don't know if there's one case of COVID that could be attributed to them getting it because they came to our records division. And to me, that's a great success. I think we can look at, if it is a long waiting period, maybe trying to figure out if there's ways that we can improve that. So yeah, that's definitely something we can look at. I would hope that she would, if she wants to get a report, though, go online. I encourage her definitely to sign up. And if there's anything that we can do to improve that, I can tell you that we'll look into it and see. Hopefully, once this thing goes away, we'll be able to open things back up. And I mean, I think hopefully everybody is wishing that everything goes back to normal, but it's going to be a new type of normal. We're going to have to figure out creative ways to make sure that we're able to provide the services that we currently do to the public in a timely manner.
Thank you very much, Chief. We'll communicate that with her. And we'll share this as well with you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief, for your report. Moving on the agenda, approval of minutes for the open session of November 18th, 2020. Vice Chair.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of November 18th, 2020.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor by roll call. Chair votes aye. Vice Chair?
Aye.
Commissioner Okinaga? Aye. Commissioner Chin?
Aye.
Commissioner Perry?
Aye.
And Commissioner Broderick?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Moving on to new business. Commissioner Chin, report on actions taken at executive session of November 4th.
Thank you, Chair. During the executive session of November 4, 2020, Commissioners approved the October 7, 2020 executive session minutes and took action on 8 complaints involving 9 officers. HPC number 2043 involved 1 complainant and 1 officer. The complaint of partiality was not sustained. HPC number 2044 involved 1 complainant and 1 officer. The complaints of discourtesy, harassment, and unnecessary use of force were not sustained. HPC number 2046 involved 1 complainant and 2 officers. The complaints of unnecessary use of oleoresin capsicum and unnecessary use of taser gun were not sustained. The complaint of excessive use of force was sustained. HPC number 2048 involved 1 complainant and 1 officer. The complaint of partiality was not sustained. HPC number 2050 involved 1 complainant and 1 officer. The complaints of partiality and discourtesy, disparaging remarks were not sustained. HPC number 2051 involved 1 complainant and 2 officers. The complaint of excessive use of force was sustained. The complaints of discourtesy, insulting remarks, and conduct unbecoming an officer were not sustained. HPC number 2077 involved one complainant and one officer. Complaints of partiality and conduct on becoming an officer were not sustained. Please, I'd like to make a motion to accept the report, Chair.
Second.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. Any discussion with respect to the report? Seeing none, all those in favor or by vote, roll call, Chair votes aye, Vice Chair.
Aye.
Commissioner Okinaga.
Aye.
Commissioner Chin.
Aye.
Commissioner Parry.
Aye.
And Commissioner Broderick.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Motion carries. Next on new business is audit of the Honolulu Police Department. Thank you to Jim, before we have our discussion. Thank you for Jim for reviewing the report and comprising somewhat of a summary that we are still working on providing all the commissioners, but I think the best summary was provided to the MLOC committee by the auditor this morning, which you should all have a copy of. If not, it's in your email boxes. I'm not sure if anyone had the chance to watch the MLOC committee meeting this morning. We were invited to participate. Chair Minor actually reached out to me directly, but we kindly declined the invitation because we would want a chance to discuss it as a body and provide commentary as a whole going forward. So without highlighting anything in particular, wanted to just maybe give Chief a chance to provide some of the commentary that may have gone on at this morning's MLA hearing and maybe some of your own reactions to the audit, if you would be willing.
I'm not sure if it's recorded, but I think on Olelo or whatever, I mean, it was a pretty long meeting. They had a lot of questions. So, I would recommend also to, take a look at that because I think it was a, pretty thorough. And plus it also, the auditors sort of gave their review at the same time. But in general, basically what we did was we just, first of all, we wanted to thank the auditors, for the review and working with us. It was a lot of back and forth, a lot of information exchange, a lot of documentation, and then when we got the draft, because the documentation we had, there were things that were taken out. So, we really thank them for the hard work that they did. And I guess the positives for the audit was that it did show that we had a very well-controlled and implemented complaint investigative system, and the resolutions for officers involving in criminal and admin investigations. The other thing that the audit did recognize was our standards of conduct and policies for our conflict of interest. And then one of the last things as far as positive is that we have very robust data collection. And we have, and of course, obviously, we've already talked about the new CADS RMS system. And so with the new RMS system coming online probably next year sometime, we're hoping that that's going to get even better. As far as the negatives were concerned, they were talking about the employee early recognition system. We have had that system in place for many years. I want to say like 5-8 years, something like that. And that was in part to our CALEA accreditation. Unfortunately, and even as a major during that time, it was not something. I mean, I think I used it a couple times, but it's not really used to the extent that it can be used. So, after this report, the audit came out, we took a look at it, and we've already started developing a training program for all of our supervisors, not just the command staff, but the sergeants sergeants, lieutenants on up, because they need to know what criteria they need to start this employee early recognition system. And then the other thing that we've started from this audit is, obviously more accountability. So every month, PSO prints out this list of all, officers, and, for every blue sheet that they submit, which is a use of force, their at-fault MVCs and some other areas. And so we're going to be highlighting each of those officers, and then we expect the commands to do a report. It doesn't necessarily have to be a really in-depth report, but what we're looking at is that just the fact that the officer is talked with, even though there may not be anything, just the fact that you talk to them and maybe there's something that the officer can come up with as to, why these things are happening. I mean, maybe it's something that we can do, better training or, better equipment or something like that. And the fact that if you reach out and you touch these officers and say, hey, we're looking at this, it might give them pause the next time that, oh, wait, something, I'm kind of on their radar, so maybe I better rethink what I'm doing. So, hopefully that'll have some, we'll see some improvements that way. And the other big thing that we just sort of lumped everything else into is that they're taking a look, wanting us to take a look to ID misconduct before it happens. We're really good. I call it we are being proactive to a reactive situation. So, and that goes along with our directives and stuff where even though our directives are, whenever we post them online, they're never permanent. I mean, they can be changed all the time. So anytime that we see something, say an officer does something, and we take a look and, there might be a loophole or something inside of our directive, we immediately take a look at it and make the changes. So, but that's not really, I guess, that's only as being proactive to reactive, but they want us to take a look at IDing people who are going to have misconduct before they even do it. And a lot of this is because, we have all this data, and how do you analyze this data to identify officers who may have misconduct before it occurs? And like I told the city council today, is that honestly, we do not have that expertise within our department. Our officers are not trained analysts, and we do not have regular analysts, like the FBI or some of the other federal agencies have to analyze data. So if they're really serious about us moving forward with this, is that we really need to create a separate unit within the department, a risk management and analysis unit, to be able to take a look at all this data to see, okay, well, what are some trends? What are some areas that we need to have improvement on? Because we do have so much data. I mean, we're good at picking one thing, like even the audit said that, like for DV, with officers, that, we're pretty good at doing that. Okay, but that's just one area of misconduct. Well, what about, other areas? I mean, we can maybe pick and choose and take a look at it, but as a whole, to say that we're going to identify officers who are going to have misconduct before it happens, I think we're going to need a higher level of people who can really analyze this data. And, the other thing is I caution is that, we really try and do a whole lot of training, but people think that training is a panacea for everything. And you can train people till the cows come home, and they know the right thing to do, but they still choose not to follow, the training that they do. And I know one of the council members was recommending like online training, and we do a lot of that, but I just don't find that online training is good for just as a refresher. But if you really want to get audience participation, you've got to get more into the face-to-face, practical, scenario-based types of things to really get it to sink in. So those are kind of the areas, the major areas of the audit that we discussed. There were a lot of questions and, back from the city council. I think overall, I think it was a positive experience, and that, it identified areas that we can do better in. And, we've never had an audit done that was this thorough, that looked at everything. So, anything that we can do to improve our processes, then I applaud it, and I've got no problem with, doing what they ask. Of course, one of the issues that did come up by one of the council members was the fact that the audit really did not touch on what it was supposed to touch on, which is how they could have prevented a Louis Kealoha thing from happening again, that it really didn't address that.
Great, did you see that?
Thank you. Commissioner Broderick has a question or comment?
Chief, first of all, thanks for highlighting the pluses. Those almost always get lost in audits. I think it's really, really important to acknowledge all the positive things that were in there, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
They put out a one-page, the city auditor put out a one-page document. And at the bottom, it says that the police department expressed general agreement with the report's findings and recommendations. You've already identified one recommendation, it's just not realistic. You need higher level staff to predict future misconduct. Are there any other recommendations that come to mind that you just either disagree with or you don't think we have the manpower to do right now?
No, especially with these next 2 years coming, I know those folks who are on the PIG got your presentation before you came in. So things are going to get quite austere. If it's going to take staffing to do it, and I don't have any specifics, but I think generally what we're doing, with the employee recognition report, and as far, the other thing we did too is that we actually changed one of our policies on investigations so that we added that there will be an annual review of all complaints, administrative as well as criminal, and that will review it from the following year. And we really never had a general report to do that. We had the use of force report, once again, very siloed, but this will cover all complaints, both administrative and criminal. And then on top of that, what we're also going to be doing is that, like the reports that we get from you folks, even though they're not sustained, we're still going to be adding them onto the early recognition, because once again, well, if somebody's making a complaint, is there smoke, where there's smoke, is there fire, is there something that we can do to make sure that the next time it doesn't happen, even though it's not sustained this time. So there are pieces that we can do. There's really nothing that I can think of the IDing of conduct before it happens, I think it's an awesome suggestion and conceptually that I don't think that we have the expertise to do right now. We'll do what we can with these other pieces, but other than that, I think everything is doable. It's just going to take time, before time to get it implemented, and also time before if we see, what results that we get from that.
Chief, that's very helpful. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments for Chief? So did you want to wait till the summary to have a discussion?
Are we doing this
Yeah,
now,
we're
or are we
doing
gonna talk about this?
I think we need a deeper dive, and I would hope that we could do a deeper dive just internally after Jim provides us the summary. And I just want to thank him for his pretty intense write-up. So once that happens, if we could provide maybe next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, so, yeah, Chair, I think what I was gonna suggest is that, particularly since Chief and her leadership staff just went through a Executive Matters and Legal Affairs Committee meeting all morning, maybe the better thing for us to do is to get a chance to process even, what happened at that meeting, and then we have another chance to be able to follow up rather than react. I have some thoughts, but I'd rather we just wait. It's probably better just to wait.
I'm fine.
Until another time.
Yeah.
I agree.
Is that okay with everyone? Okay. Thank you, Chief. Okay, we'll take that up at our next meeting, which will likely be the second meeting, third week in January, depending if we decide to meet on January 6th, I believe, or whatever that first Wednesday is, the 4th. Okay, moving on from the audit, the next thing on our agenda is the consideration of request for legal counsel. Commissioner Okinawa.
Thank you. Commissioner Chin has kindly agreed to take the first one.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure, I'm gonna handle Roman numeral 6.3A on the new business calendar. That's for Mark Kawasaki. And I wanted to inform the commission that I had a chance to review the memo that was submitted by Corporation Counsel, which included the description of what is an officer's scope of duty, the different rules of the police commission, as well as the complaint. And I also was able to review the recommendation. To sum up what the complaint is all about, this is the same case that I spoke about last week, where there was basically an arrest for being somebody who distributes crystal methamphetamine. And so the allegation is that the officers, including this one, was involved in the investigation and relied upon an unreliable informant. And so because of that unreliable informant, then the result was that this plaintiff was then unlawfully arrested. They had their property seized, and so that's the reason why they're making the law. That's the reason why they're bringing the lawsuit. So given all that, Corporation Counsel has found that the suit occurred according to the allegations of the complaint in the performance of his duty as a police officer. And so with that, I recommend that we concur with that recommendation and that we approve legal counsel.
Recuse.
Thank you.
I second the motion.
Thank you for the seconding of the motion. Recognizing Commissioner Okinaga's recusal. Any discussion with respect to the motion? Seeing none, Chair votes aye. Vice Chair?
Votes aye.
Commissioner Chin?
Aye.
Commissioner Perry?
Aye.
And Commissioner Broderick?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Moving on to number 3B, Sergeant Artie Kendall, retired.
So with your permission, Chair, I'd like to take up the two requests at the same time because it's the same case. So Sergeant Kendall and Corporal Uemura.
Okay, the only request is that we do separate votes on
Yes.
each. Okay,
And
great.
it may have different results. I'm not prejudging. So this one, bear with me, please, is complicated for me. I don't have necessarily a conclusion and wanted to talk it through with the commission in a way that doesn't violate anybody's process so that we can, if the way to have a process is a contested case hearing, defer to that process as opposed to prejudging something or indicating advanced judgment before we even have the benefit of both sides. But the basic confusion, I'll say up front, is that, and maybe a better way to phrase it is, when we have some allegations that may be what we view as incident to or covered, but then there's other allegations that we think may not be covered, then what is the obligation of the commission with respect to representation? So I don't know if Corp Counsel wants to answer that question in open or exec session.
The statute is doesn't make a distinction between that in terms of the allegations, and we are not, unlike the court had indicated, we're not an insurance company, so we don't have reservations of rights, things like that. So if you determine that they're in the course, it doesn't matter whether there's a second allegation of things that happen outside of his responsibility. We are obligated to provide a defense. The statute does not require us to provide indemnification, so maybe that's why we don't have a reservation of right, but we would have to provide a defense.
Okay, so I think that's helpful, at least for me, in analyzing this. I'll give a brief summary and then with the forbearance of the fellow commissioner members, maybe invite a brief discussion and then make a recommendation. I didn't have so Corp Counsel in this particular matter has recommended grant of legal counsel for both. This is a case brought by plaintiff's attorney Eric Seitz, Della Galati, and their firm, and Revere and Associates, as well as the ACLU of Hawaii Foundation. The defendants are the city and county, as well as Corporal Uemura and Sergeant Kendall. Not clear if the claims are brought in their official or individual capacity, and that is something that I'm used to having the benefit of, and it wasn't provided. So, in other words, I don't know how much of this is intentional by the plaintiff's attorney in the drafting of the complaints to add additional confusion to the issue. So I'm just gonna say I really honestly don't have an opinion. It was brought in the U.S. federal court. It was well publicized. The claims against Sergeant Kendall are effectively around one distinct act and then a series of failures to act to discipline or supervise Corporal Uemura. The causes of action against Sergeant Kendall are 3 against him as an, individual, so supervisory liability, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and negligent infliction of emotional distress. Can you understand me? Should I take off my, okay. And then there are 8 claims, that are against him and a, combination of defendants: false arrest, imprisonment, malicious prosecution, malicious abusive process, violation of equal protection. I can't read my own shorthand, I'm sorry. Negligence and civil conspiracy. The relief that's sought is declaratory and injunctive relief, as well as damages, including expungement of any and all criminal and/or arrest records for their son. The memo from Corp Counsel is silent as to any disciplinary action taken against Sergeant Kendall, which is different than the memo provided for us for Corporal Uemura. So getting to Corporal Uemura, multiple actions on his part alleged, as well as, omissions. It was noted in the memo from Corporation Counsel that HPD sustained allegations of misconduct against Corporal Uemura in connection with the subject incident. It's not clear. There's a number of incidents alleged, so I'm not 100% clear about which subject incident, which adds to my confusion. There were 4 causes of action brought against Corporal Uemura alone: unreasonable search and seizure, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent infliction of emotional distress, assault and battery. And then the remaining 8 claims are brought again against a combination of defendants: false arrest, imprisonment, malicious prosecution, malicious abusive process, violation of equal protection, negligence, and civil conspiracy. And again, the same claims for injunctive, declaratory relief, and damages. Court Counsel recommended approval, granting, and especially because of the and I understand the Corporation Counsel or the city is going to be appealing the decision about grant of Chief Kealoha's attorney seat. So basically, the standard under which we review these cases is going further up in appeal. So hopefully that'll provide additional clarification. So I really thank the city for assisting us in that, pursuing that, because I think we would benefit from clarification on this. But in any event, in the memos from Corporation Counsel, as already described by Commissioner Chin, we have the statutory 52D8, where it talks about, when they're sued in their capacity, and 52D9, which is our determination of scope and duty, and then we have Rule 11, which says whether the act was incident to or required or authorized work-related activity, which I can imagine that some of the alleged acts against at least Corporal Uemura seemed not to be, and whether the act was incident to a course of conduct taking place at the time the officer was required to engage in a course of conduct by the nature of the officer's responsibilities as a police officer. Again, so there's allegations going both ways. Maybe there's a third leg of it for completion of Aaron's notes. The third and is whether the act was incident to a course of conduct engaged in at a place that the officer was authorized to engage in it by the nature of the officer's responsibilities as a police officer. I'm not sure how much conversation we should be having. That's my question.
Can I just clarify what I had earlier said?
Yeah.
Although 52D does not make a distinction as to whether part of the allegations were within his performance of his duties or not, if you find at least portions of it, we are obligated to provide a defense. But that does not mean that my office will provide a defense. That means we might have to provide special counsel because there is a conflict, or when someone in my office looks at it, or even the special deputy who is hired looks at it, they may advise the individual officer, and you may have to notify your homeowner's insurance. So there's little things after your decision that come into play in my office, and I just wanted to explain some of that to you.
So for, I guess because I'm charged with making a recommendation, thank you for that. I think that clarifies. I'd like to concur with Corporation Counsel's recommendation for grant of legal representation for Sergeant Kendall and recommend contested case hearing, I guess, for further development of facts on Corporal.
So how can you have a contested case hearing when corporate counsel's saying yes, and they're asking for it? The ones who are objecting, if you like, may be us. So is that a contested case hearing?
It can be, it's just further, yeah, it's our call and further development of the facts, because when you have Corporation Counsel defending that recommendation and then, I'm sorry, I keep monkey, Corporal Uemura's, I'm terrible at this stuff. Corporal Uemura's attorney usually are advocating the other position.
I know, but they're both going to be advocating the same position in this case, right?
Oh.
You
That's
mean
true.
corporation or Ms.
Well,
Kaskian, right?
Yeah,
On
we'll
the,
both be arguing for.
Yes, but at that time, you would review the
facts.
full record. You would
Yeah.
review the complaint, you would review the police reports, if any, and the recommendation actually references police reports. So you're not looking, you don't see the police reports at this time. So, yes, and it is ultimately your decision whether there's a recommendation from Corporation Counsel one way or the other.
So would that's a really good point. So is that more conducive to just asking for more information outside of a contested case hearing then? You know what I mean? Do we have the ability to do that?
A contested case hearing is required, but there's a due process matter. So you can't deny the request unless you have a contested case hearing. So my suggestion would have a contested case hearing and just ask for all the records, and maybe this technically not a hearing, but you guys have to review the records, and you can ask the police officer involved if he or she has any additional information. But you need to give that person, police officer, an opportunity to be heard before you deny.
That's it.
And if you're unsure,
Yeah.
and somehow you take a vote today and it's a no, then you probably violated his constitutional rights.
No, we're not doing that.
So that's what I'm saying. If you're unsure, you should tell them, we're unsure, we can't make a decision, please provide additional information.
And that is what you're recommending?
That would be my
Commissioner
recommendation. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay. Thank you. So if we could first take up more discussion?
No.
Commissioner Perry? If we could take up Sergeant Kendall's request first and then open it up for further discussion based on previous recommendation? Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Perry. Okay, with respect to the request for legal counsel by Sergeant Artie Kendall, before we go into a vote, any discussion with respect to Commissioner Okinaga's recommendation to grant? Seeing,
Sure.
sorry.
I mean, I was just going to say, I was actually going to concur with Commissioner Okinaga's recommendation. Just, I'm new. I'm still trying to get comfortable with what this standard is, and I think the part that I'm really mindful about is how it really has to do with like whether people's tax dollars are being used to pay for this, and so the reason why I can see a difference is because Sergeant Kendall is more, but just the facts seem to support more obviously Sergeant Kendall acting within the scope of his employment. Whereas for Corporal Uemura, I think we're definitely left with questions.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
So, so my inclination is to go along with what is before us right now, which is the granting of representation for Kendall. But I'm also signaling how I feel about Corporal Uemura's case right now.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Chair votes aye. Vice Chair?
Aye.
Commissioner Okinaga? Aye. Commissioner Chin?
Aye.
Commissioner Perry?
Aye.
And Commissioner Broderick?
Aye.
Motion carries. Now to Corporal Uemura's request for legal counsel and the recommendation that we set it for contested case hearing for further questions and further review of the facts of the case. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
So tell me what we're actually gonna get. We're gonna get a stack of paper before the meeting, before
Yes.
the hearing.
In preparation for the hearing and an opportunity to question the attorney representing Corporal Uemura and
Okay.
Ms. Caskin.
Okay. That's fine.
Is that okay? Everybody comfortable? Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Chair votes aye. Vice Chair?
Aye.
Commissioner Okinaga? Commissioner Chin?
Aye.
Commissioner Perry?
Aye.
And Commissioner Broderick? Thank you. Motion carries. Okay, thank you so much for that. That was a complex one and
Yeah.
appreciate the content by Corporation Counsel as well. Okay, I think we're now coming up to the election. Oh, no, discussion of allowing in-person public testimony. I had requested that we put this on the agenda because there has been just discussion with staff with respect to allowing the public in. And we wanted to bring it to the commission's attention and for consideration of any concerns that would bring the commission. We have checked with Chief and Chief is okay to allowing testifiers to individually come into the room when it's their turn to testify. I don't think we would take away the option for telephonic testimony, but allow the live testimony. And we'd be following the guidelines provided at the City Council, which has been allowing in-person live testimony if those folks request. So just wanting to bring it to the Commission's attention and if there's a discussion about it. Thank you.
So I guess the only comment that I would have about that is that, that's fine if we allow something like that, but I think we should just let the people know what this room looks like.
Yeah.
So that they don't, you know, because they will be thinking that they're walking into the city council chamber. And then when they see this room, they might be like, oh, nobody told me that
It's so
this
small.
is the place it's gonna be like. And yes, everybody's wearing a mask, but I wasn't comfortable with it. So I think they should know, you know, this is the dimensions of this room and there is no window, there are no windows and, you know, people are wearing masks, but that's what's going on.
Do you suggest maybe if they show an interest or show up that we inform them individually? Or, I mean, even in our agenda notice, we could inform them of the close quarters, that we're following guidelines, but the expectation is that you would be sitting like right there or standing right there.
Or the other option is just to wait 6 more months, you know?
We could do that and.
I guess the question I have is what's changed in terms of COVID that we're now comfortable that we weren't comfortable before? That's what I'm missing.
You mean in person?
Yeah.
Oh, just the proximity and the social distance.
I don't know, why do we allow it now that we wouldn't allow it 6 months ago?
What has changed in terms of the disease that now makes us comfortable doing that when we were not comfortable before?
I guess I don't have an answer to that.
I think it's been evolving too.
Yeah.
The tiering and our awareness of the disease and what other boards and commissions have been doing.
I have to say, I feel a little uncomfortable because I think already we're sort of cramming as many in here as we can. And just adding more people seems to me that we're.
Especially because Chief won't come down yet.
Really?
Yes, sorry, guys.
Yeah.
I was like, we would want you to come down first, so I totally.
We'll tell you all about our little room.
Hey, I hate to see all of you guys quarantined at the same time.
We'll join via WebEx. Don't worry, we won't miss a meeting. No, but definitely sensitive to the concern, and that's why we wanted to bring it. And I think it's just an effort to accommodate the public, but we are making extreme measures, thanks to Erin, you know, and Chief, your staff for accommodating us. So if we want to hold off for a little bit more and, you know, kind of observe the different levels of
I
government
would
guidance.
say that, I would volunteer again to stay back and do it. It is not easy for a commission member to participate via that. So however much I'd like to volunteer to do it again,
rotate if we
but
need
it's not
to.
easy. I mean, we should do it on a rotational basis because it's not easy.
Yeah.
And the new people were, you know, they needed the full benefit. So
Thank
I'm
you.
fine doing it. It's just, I would say it's hard to participate. So I think we're, yeah.
We should wait, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the full discussion, appreciate it. Okay, sorry, Jerry. Kind of move into the next room. Okay, great. I think now it brings us to the election of chair and vice chair. And just for reference, I need to reference the script that Erin sent me because I didn't have it printed out. So it is now time for the election of chair and vice chair to the Police Commission. Pursuant to revised Charter Section 13-103F and HPC Rule 7-2, we annually elect a chair and vice chair at the beginning of December. I'd like to entertain nominations for the position of chair of the Police Commission. Is there any nominations?
I'd like to unabashedly nominate the current chair for re-upping, if she's willing to, it goes for the same leadership team. I so very much appreciate all the work and the time that the both of you spend, but Chair, do we have to take them separately? I see, okay. So the chair has continued to not just do homework for us and then relay to us the context and the summary for each agenda item that I very much appreciate. Having been a chair of a different body, it's a lot of work and I really appreciate that. But besides that, there's a balance that we need to strike as a commission that I feel like, okay, so for one thing, we have a lot of diverse opinions, so managing that is a lot. But besides that, the independence of the commission vis-a-vis the department, yet working with the department on completely shared goals of improving the department is a balance, and it takes a lot of work. And I just want to say, I think the chair's been doing a great job, and I'd like to nominate you.
I would second the motion.
Thank you. Any
You're
further
willing, right?
nominations?
Was that motion? Good motion.
I'm willing, but only if if everyone is okay with it, because it is a lot of work. I have been honored to be considered again, and thank you, Commissioner Okinaga. I think it really is an opportunity to continue our good work. It's been a process, and I really I'm really excited about the new commissioners joining, just because the freshness of ideas and kind of more homework that we need to do is necessary. I mean, to continue to ensure that our role as commission is, as stated, not only in the charter but beyond, in ensuring the department is moving forward. And I look forward to continuing to work with you all. So.
And are we in discussion?
Oh, okay.
Okay, sure.
Thank
So,
you.
Chair, I just want to say that I concur with this, and I really support it. I think what I've noticed in the short time that I've been on the commission is how I think you have done a really good job of just not only asking tough questions, but also being positive and supportive, and striking a good balance in those areas. And I think probably the most healthy thing for the department is to have that balance and to not necessarily, I mean, I think all positive would be bad, would be really unhealthy, and not good for the public. And I also think all negative would also not be healthy for the department. So that's why I support you for 2021.
I also concur 100%.
If I could just echo Commissioner Okinaga, I too, for better or for worse, have chaired commissions, and it's a tremendous amount of time. And I've been humbled, Commissioner Alvarado, at the amount of work that you have produced and the effort that you've made. I very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I totally support the job you've been doing, and I think it's very healthy. I don't think there's a time frame. I think it's not. I wouldn't want you to be the chair for the next 5 years just because I think we need to have that turnover. But I absolutely support it for this upcoming year and perhaps another year or two after that.
Thank you. Thank you for the discussion. And I don't know if it's proper that I would call for the vote. Would it be better if Vice Chair did?
I'd like to call for the vote of the chair for the next annual, until the next annual review, 2021. All in favor? Starting with Chen.
Aye.
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 That would be 6 ayes.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for your confidence. I look forward to hard work ahead, and it'll start with our annual evaluation of Chief. Again, we just did it in June, so I look forward to that. It's gonna be a lot of work. So now I'd like to entertain the nominations for position of Vice Chair of the Police Commission.
If Commissioner Gibson is willing, I would nominate him.
I would be willing, and I thank you very much for your confidence.
I'll second.
Thank you.
I just want to
Discussion.
add my thank you for, I know you spent a lot of time as well, and it's a great team, so I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your willingness to serve.
Thank you.
And I too just wanted to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say
Commissioner Perry,
likewise.
go ahead.
No. I admire the job you're doing and appreciate it, so thank you. Happy to support it.
Thank you, and I too just wanted to thank you, Commissioner Vice Chair Gibson, because it really is a team effort, and I think as a body as a whole, but leaning on your Vice Chair, especially if one of us isn't able to attend the meeting, but we have had perfect attendance so far. I just want to highlight that, and it's important that not only that we show up, but we work hard when we do show up. So thank you for your willingness to continue.
Thank you very much, Chair.
And if I could just note that I think the chemistry and rapport between Commissioner Alvaro and Commissioner Gibson is really wonderful. And it's a great thing to observe that.
Amen.
Thank you, appreciate that. And with that, if I could call for the vote of Vice Chair Jerry Gibson, Commissioner Okinaga.
Aye.
Commissioner Chin.
Aye.
Commissioner Perry.
Aye.
Commissioner Broderick.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Now current Vice Chair Gibson.
Aye, thank you.
Thank you. The vote is unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on our agenda, unfinished business, Chief of Police evaluation. And with that, our continued evaluation of you, Chief, will commence or has commenced, and we'll be sending you a formal memo indicating our timeline, taking into account your vacation, and respecting your time with family and for you to have a break. So with that, we'll continue to be in contact with respect to the evaluation. And again, we welcome the public to provide input on the Chief's evaluation. It will continue to be on our agenda going forward, and we welcome your participation in Chief's evaluation. And with that, we'll move to Executive Officer's Report. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Chair. As of yesterday, the 15th, number of cases for this year is 113. Of the 113, 19 remain pending. Cases referred to PSO is 32, 4 from 2019. Cases closed by public service report is 23, with 12 from 2019. Administratively closed is 4, and withdrawn is 7. There are 2 cases that from July that remain pending due to a variety of circumstances, but the complainants have been notified of the delay. None in August, and there's approximately 4 in September, and the rest for October, November, and December, as you can see, is remain active.
Questions for Jim? Jim, I just had a question. When you communicate with the complainants about delay, what are their reactions? And I guess the expectation when you receive the complaint, are they told that it's gonna take, several months? And not caught by surprise when, after 4 months, the conclusion isn't reached?
That, yes, and, well, the two for these, involved, cases that were, adopted by me from, the investigator that left. So, that was, circumstances that are, is very unusual, but I've been in contact with the complainants, regularly, and they seem to understand.
Thank you.
I'm working on it, and, it's gonna be completed. As for the investigator position, it's still pending. HR review approval. As for the temporary position, is still pending. I haven't heard anything back from HR. But being that it's the end of the year, there are some circumstances like vacations and things of that nature.
So when you say pending, you mean that they're still working on it?
They're still working on it, and
It's just taking time.
yes,
You have a candidate.
we have a candidate.
Yeah, it's just,
Well, for the temporary one, as for the vacant position, it still has to be advertised in the vacancy announcements. So that is still in process.
maybe you can fill the permanent one before you
Bring on the
get
temporary.
approval for the.
Thank you, Jim. Anything further?
I have nothing further to report.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Broderick, if you could take us into executive session.
Yes, and I can't promise that I'll go as quick as Commissioner Chin.
I know. I was like, that's all right.
Following agenda items will be reviewed in the executive session pursuant to HRS 92-5A, subsections 2, 4, 5, 6, and 8. To consider the hire, evaluation, dismissal, or discipline of an officer or employee, or of charges brought against an officer or employee, where consideration of matters affecting privacy will be involved. To consult with its attorneys on questions and issues pertaining to the board's powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities. To investigate proceedings regarding criminal misconduct, to consider sensitive matters related to public safety or security, to deliberate or make a decision upon a matter that requires the consideration of information that must be kept confidential pursuant to state or federal law or a court order. During this meeting, there may be discussion with the chief of police and her staff regarding internal strategies and sensitive criminal investigation matters relating to public safety. The disclosure could significantly risk the circumvention of law and undermine the effectiveness of the public's protection by the police.
Thank you for the motion.
I also move that we move to closed executive session.
Thank you. Any second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, chair votes aye. Vice Chair?
Aye.
Commissioner Okinaga?
Aye.
Commissioner Chin?
Aye.
Commissioner Perry?
Aye.
And Commissioner Broderick?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. We'll move into executive session. To members of the public, we'll be signing off of the live WebEx. Thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at our next meeting. Thank you, Chief. 5-minute break, is that okay?
Yeah, okay, all the ACs, you can log out, please.